What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Danish Kitchen Pokemon TCG. Of course, here a League Cup top 8 between myself, Jesper Eriksson, of course, and Oscar Madsen, my secondary part of the channel, of course. Now, in this matchup, we're playing Dragon Ball Dusknoir versus Dragon Ball Charizard. Really exciting matchup in terms of a lot of things. Dragon Ball Dusknoir come off to an early start. Use the Dusknoirs to remove some of the bench and kind of play a bit around. Whereas for Oscar, he's playing Rabsca. As we saw in the latest video against Zoroark, Rabsca wasn't a very efficient tool to block the bench damage because not only does it block damage to the bench, it also prevents effects to the bench, which means that Oscar is available to put down Rabsca and block all the damage that I would be able to do with Dragon Bolt. Now, when we're looking at it that way, Oscar starts up beautifully, Buddy Puffin. That's how you want to start every single match, and kind of moldering over, do we go early for Rabsca? And the answer is almost, in these kinds of matchups, yes, absolutely. Because you want to be able to just shut it down efficiently before I can get going. Typically, if you're going seconds via TM Evo, that you want to get the Rabsca into play, whereas now, put it down turn 1, hopefully get the Evo turn 2 to make sure that the Rabsca get established, because as I'm sitting at playing Dragon Ball Dusknoir, I don't want to be using a boss's orders, a counter catcher, actually using time to take out the Rabsca. I want that to be taken out effective immediately. Of course here, Ultra Ball for Budyu. For me as well, it's another situation of use Budyu, have to lock down what happens here, checking through the deck in terms of, boss's orders, Dusknoir line, counter catchers, anything that's, particularly good in this matchup, whereas we're playing a pseudo mirror. Whereas Oscar with PultZard is, of course, having Charizard as that partner to Dragon Ball, where I'm just playing good old Dragon Ball Dusknoir, but of course the more aggressive version that plays both Squawkabilly and Quadruple Research to make sure that we bust through the deck as fast as possible. The essence of the matchup is just, can I get a lot of Dusknoirs going to make sure that I can take out the Rabsca whenever that hits. Of course, me also is just cutting after Buddy Puffin. Me and Oscar, it's a cup. We're playing at a pretty decent pace here, and we're both good friends, and we know what we each other are doing. So, deck searches after turn finish and stuff like that, all fine and dandy. Use a Buddy Puffin, a Dreepy, and a Duskull, it looks like. So the setup I'm getting here is pretty good. Decided not to play the secondary Puffin. Perhaps I should, to make sure I can get to thin out the deck. Here, just finding a Duskull. And there's multitudes of options I can go for the last bench spot. Could be Squawkabilly to extend my search of cards. Of course, with the items presumably being locked down next turn, or Oscar having the opportunity to lock down these item cards next turn, it's really important to make sure that doesn't happen. But yeah, Squawk and Seize, going straight for it. And I do see, at least there's a Dracloak there. So with Dracloak, it's all right. And with the rescue board getting to retreat, and go ahead and use the Itchy Pawn to make sure that at least I can start locking it down. Oscar straight away goes for box scouting, searching through, either getting 2 basics or an evolution card. But here, the name of the game is to get these Dracloaks set up. Make sure that you can have more Dracloaks in play than your opponent, or earlier than your opponent, to make sure that at all times that you can be ahead both on board and on prizes. We do see the Recon Directive here, getting a boss. Not super consequential yet, but getting an attachment on. And from here, it looks pretty bad for Oscar. Has to go ahead and use the Dragon Headbutt with the Dracloak. Not the situation I want to be in. It also leaves the door open for me. An attachment here can make sure I can use Dragon Headbutt, but also that if I hit a Dusclops off this, I can get started right away and getting way ahead by removing the only Dracloak on board that Oscar currently has. And there's no Charmanders down, which means that even though I'm not item locking this turn, he won't be able to get the Charizard in play with the Raikini, for example. And we do get the Dusclops here off the first recon. Of course, going to use the second recon. Who doesn't want more cards? Dusknoir is one of the pieces. Not a piece you want unless you can get Dusclops on board and let's stay there. If I get a Dusclops here, which I do have, I always want to make sure that, I don't need Dusknoir at that point, but it might just be a case of having to pick the best of 2 bad cards of recon. Because you have to remember, with playing such a heavy research line, that I sometimes have to pick a card that I'd rather want to discard than another. But double Dusclops. Okay, that means that Dusknoir is very live. Also an opportunity to put down Festivity and use it if I can let go of that bench space, but that bench space could also be very good for Duskull. Play down a Festivity, use it, more options, more Super Odd, which means that with this current version of list I'm running, playing double Super Odd, I can go ahead and use Dusclops, recycle it back. The name of the game for my list is to use as many Dusclops pieces as possible to make sure that I can get a lock on a board and use Iono to very low numbers. The discussion here is that, do I want to be using the second Dusclops when I'm facing a challenge that said, I have to get Dragapult next turn. I don't want to fill up my deck with cards I don't need. And of course, getting the additional Dragapult does help that case here. And getting another Duskull back. And getting to use Nest Ball straight away for another Duskull here is exactly what I want to be doing here to make sure that the pressure stays on board. And making sure also that with the board advantage I want to make sure that that keeps in place. That the board position here stays the same. Of course, Oscar gets to respond back next turn. Not by much, since I said, no Charmander is down. But making sure that we get to a point of, well, attacking is probably not going to happen for Oscar's side unless there's a Buddy next turn. So I have to make sure that I am as well protected against a Buddy as possible. And I do get the Dragon Headbutt for a knockout. Oscar at 4 prizes since I exploded that Dusclops there. Getting the prize taken on the Direct Cloak was just immense. Meaning that whatever Oscar had set up there, I could take out. Had I been able to do the Dusclops before the research and perhaps play Iono instead, that would have been great. Not the option that I had. And Oscar's just staring down a very, very hard spot to start. Because, as said, no attacker. Can go Arcane to Dragapult and do 70. That doesn't sound good either. So, most of the decisions here that Oscar has are pretty bad. Has double Puffin to make sure he can fill up his board. Draws just another Iono. Not something which you want additionals off in this case. But getting to Buddy Puffin and search out Charmander, Buddy. And the most important thing for Oscar that he can do this turn is get double Charmander out. And get Rabsca into play. Because if you can do that, you can essentially make sure that if I don't sit on a boss, which I'm pretty sure I actually discarded with the first recharge round, that I won't be able to take out both Charmanders. And if I'm not able to take out both Charmanders, I will end up in a spot which turns very difficult because then I have to sort of play around with my prize cards in a matter where Charizard cannot become effective. Because if Charizard becomes effective, I do not have a defense to that. Since that at some point will be able to one-shot every single of my Pokemon. Goes with a Buddy Puffin. Kind of mulls over the Buddy, thinking a bit about it. And ultimately looking a bit through. But the name of the game here is to keep me at bay for as long as he can. Because if he can keep me at bay for a couple of turns to make sure he can get to set up his board, get Charizard into play, this matchup quickly shifts. It was the same that we saw in the EYC format where both me and Oscar played the same 60 off Dragapult Charizard to great success. Oscar getting 9th, I think I got top 256 or something I like. And getting out the Cloak here. Of course, again, making sure that we can get to set up this draw engine. With the Cloak here, Oscar is not able to get Multitudes in play since the start of the turn was just a measly Aurelor and a 3P. But getting to look through a bit with the Recon. Wanting to try and hit something like Unfair Stamp this turn to make sure that I don't get the easy access to Dusknoir that I could have. Getting to attach Luminous Energies to sort of work as a retreating option, and then playing the Iono to set me down a bit. It's not... Iono to 5 is not super efficient. For Oscar, it's making sure he gets to draw cards. And that was another reason why that getting to blow up the Dusclops last turn was very good. Because it meant that Iono, which is the only draw supporter Oscar plays, turned live. So we do see the Itchy Pollen, and already do have the Dragapult in hand, which is really nice. Because it makes sure we can start taking up Pokemon on the bench. Now the Question is here, if I can get double Dusclops, I can take out both Charmanders and the active Buddy, which in turn would make sure that I get the heavy advantage. Do you get to use the recon and then evolve? Make sure to do that always so you don't waste the ability. But here ultimately just looking for more cards and more options. Attachment's always nice to make sure that I get to have the second Dragapult eventually waiting in the wings. But here, mulling over the options in terms of what do I do? I'm gonna Iono here, putting Oscar down to 4, not consequentially giving him an extra card essentially, because that's not what we're thinking about here. I'm thinking about how do I press my advantage. And the Ichipal improving, quite annoying again. That Ultra Ball there could have been really, really nice to have. And second Dusclops coming down. This could just spell doom for both Charmanders if I do elect to. But we do go for the Dracloak here. And the sort of, justifying moment that you can do that is if I get to play Counter Catcher this turn and blow up the second Dusclops, which I can't, but I'll take out both. And perhaps here, with the way that this was played, I'll have 2 damage counters over here. I should just have taken both Charmanders out. That would have pushed the advantage so far. But here, kind of banking on Oscar not hitting Raikkonen Charizard is terrible. Had I taken out both Charmanders, I think this game would have been over now, by the way. Like, blowing up double Dusclops, I shouldn't have cared about him having Dracloak in play. Kind of tunnel vision here, actually. Because it just doesn't make sense if you can take out both Charmanders and essentially just rule out the chance that Oscar can get a Dragapult into play. And if I want to go for this line, it should have just gone for exploding Dusclops before. And when I get into the spots of I've hit double Dusclops as I initially actually wanted, then it makes much more sense to just go for double Charmander KO to make sure that there's going to be no offense. Because here, a Raikkonen Charizard is going to do 270 and essentially set it up so Oscar, if he hits a Dracloak this turn, and I do not knock out the Dracloak, it's going to be a board swipe. This doesn't look too great in terms of that exactly. Because if Rabsca hits 2 this turn, then it's just all going to go haywire. Oscar getting the Dracloak off the Night Stretcher after using a Super Rod for the Charizard, which is the target this turn. And getting Raikkonen too, and I do think I see an Ultra Ball. There's also the option to play down Pheasant Deputy and use it, but that's just going to open up another route for me to take this game in 2 turns. Oscar's no way guaranteed hitting everything here, but could go Ultra Ball, way to counter catcher Iono, get the Charizard, get free cards out of the deck before using Pheasant Deputy and charging up the free cards in hand. Because essentially here, Oscar can win in 2 attacks. Can win by doing 270, putting my Dragapult up to 280 damage. And then counter catcher, a 3P for example, and just take the rest out on bench. And what a beautiful draw. Rabsca hit there, Jacques with the Raikkonen in hand, but also the Ultra Ball, which just looks way better, being able to discard double Jacques. So he hit 2 Jacques and the Rabsca off the Pheasant Deputy, exactly as the doctor ordered in this case here. What Oscar wants here is just to make sure that this Charizard gets established, and I wouldn't even say missed opportunity for my case. It's a massive blunder, rather, that leads Oscar open with this. This could have been a board with no Charmers in play, and it would have been no pressure. But with the way that this goes here, it's ending up in a situation where I get heavily damaged. I don't have a second Dragapult to back up, and I don't have a boss's orders left. And if I were to blow up the Dusclops and then go ahead and take out the Dracloak, it would also end up in a bad situation where I then afterwards have to hit another counter catcher to take out a Pheasant Deputy and another Duscloak piece, which seems very unfeasible, especially after an Iono to free being played. No knockouts taken, which means no Pheasant Deputy, only one Dracloak on board, and just this massively damaged Dragapult. So it has to be a route where Charizard gets damaged. The Charizard then gets taken out by Dragapult, saying that Oscar does not hit a way to take a knockout, and then being able to take the game that way. A long way around, which could have been avoided in this specific case. I think this is like where I initially saw that blunder that could have been, especially with the Dusclops on bench, trying rather to have gone for a move where I could have Dusknor and kind of checkmated this game from the get-go here. One thing for sure is that getting that secondary Dragon Bolt is target number one. Making sure that I can get to attack with a clean attacker and forcing Oscar's hands a little bit here. Oscar's also low on cards. I have to remember that with only a Dracloak in play. And if I don't activate Defense, well, Oscar's going to get what he has plus his top deck and the card he gets off Recon Directive. So not as much as he wanted. And of course, no way that I'm blowing up the Dusknor this turn. It just means that another Candy Charizard would have been mush. Because essentially here, had the Rabsca not been in play, this would have been game already. Dusknor on the active and being able to take out the Charmander with 10 damage on bench, but Rabsca is there to protect that bench, just like the Machoke we saw around the 2017 era of play. And yeah, just a Phantom Dive for 200, putting that Charizard to 210, and not a hot hand looking for Oscar. Gets to Arven. Counter catcher not available though, as we're both on free prices. We have to remember that. So it gets into a sticky situation of, well, Oscar's the boss here. That's massive. Boss off the Dracloak, hitting exactly what he needed here, since not hitting the boss would initially just have been game. Charizard just doing 270 would have been enabling me to just do Dusknor on the bench and being able to take out the Charizard thereafter. Now, with the rescue board attached to Festivity, not that it does too much, but rather so, Dragon Ball get into play to make sure that that sweep can be done next turn. And this turn, well, had Oscar had an energy card for his Dragon Ball, he could have just easily taken the game. But right here, Oscar can also just take out the Dragon Ball, meaning that if I take out his Charizard, it also gets really hard to do everything. Or set up the game in a matter where taking out Fess, leaving me with a free card hand, no Dracloak in play, also leaves this a very difficult spot, since I would not be able to blow up the Dusknor for 2 additional prizes, since that would give Oscar his last prize. Because Oscar going down to 1 prize now, and it's all hanging in the balance. I'm just going to push this Dragon Ball because it has the rescue board. Essentially has free retreat. And the only thing that I'm banking off for next turn is Oscar not hitting an energy. But he has both Fess and Dippity and potential extra supporter cards to make sure either to fit or to draw more cards. Although, at this stage for Oscar, and I wanted to one would just give him 1 card, but with top deck, it's 2. Fess and Dippity, that'll be 5. So not much to help out here, and me essentially just sitting and wasting cards. But yeah, that 1 swing turn would have done massive stuff. Had that boss not been hit off the Recon Directive, we would have been in game 2 already. But yeah, these crucial moments where Oscar was able to capitalize on the seemingly bad board management by me, and making sure that happens there. But yeah, seeing the whiffs off both, I want to keep this additional bench spot open for a Halucha. While I'm looking over my resources, looking at it like, why did it end up where this happened with Oscar having no Dracloak on board versus what turned out to be a seemingly decent board for me. But yeah, just retreating, taking knockout on Charizard, and basically hoping for 2 things. Oscar not getting another Red Candy Charizard, because that would just be one-shotting. But yeah, just going with Headbutts. Didn't seem too great either. All the chance I had was for none. And yeah, Oscar showing the Luminous Energy for the game. Yeah, the Dragon Headbutt was to try and set up a case where I could have just gone for Lucha at some point. But that ended up not mattering and not being an actual good play at all. So we're going into game 2 here. And yeah, whenever you're getting gifted such a board position, you have to just wrap it up. And that's the story of this game. Going into game 2, having to pick up a lot. This matchup has been played a lot before. And yeah, as most Dragon Bolt matchups are, it's a sort of a war of trying to make sure that you get into spots where you're so much farther ahead than your opponent. You are having to lead on the cloaks and the amount of draw support in play. But shuffling up here for game 2, I always pick to go second in these Dragapult mirrors because it means that Oscar would have one turn to find Buddy Poffins, which with no additional draw support like Swalkability, for example, would not be able to happen. And myself getting to play both Supporter and perhaps Squawkabilly, but starting Pheasantipity, not so nice in these positions as you want to just put that down whenever it's useful and not leave that out to hang, especially when you're not playing Rabsca, because Rabsca can help you out massively in these positions to make sure that, yeah, you don't get hit, essentially. Oscar hitting a mulligan, me getting extra card of the mulligan. And yeah, what I'm looking for here is basics. Basics and a lot of them, if I can get them to fill up my board. And Oscar getting either to start with Charmander or Rellor. Choosing the Charmander, which is much better. You want the Rellor to be on the bench for Team Evo, and essentially it's just a matter of bench the Rellor. And do you even want to attach the rescue board to Charmander here? Oscar likes to do, since an Arven for Buddy Poffin plus Team Evo would be enough, because you can just Team Evo with an eventual Dreepy. And debating attaching the Luminous attaches to Rellor, since that will just take the knockout on Buddy, since it does 30 with the slight intrusion, and me just attaching to make sure that I can get to retreat into a potential secondary basic, which usually just is a Buddy, and using Iono, wanting to hit basics. And we see it, none of them. And just to flicker of the hand, pass, top decks to Evo. It is a sort of spot where Oscar can do two things. There's already the Luminous Energy on the Rellor. I don't have any basics in play, which means that even if you Evo with the Rellor, there's no threat to it. So for Oscar, it's just about setting up that perfect board. Or you can basically just look at your hand, be like, well, there's a Dracolic in hand, there's a Brock Scouting, which means you can get additional supporters. You can get additional supporting Pokemon out, which is essentially the thing he chooses to do here by retreating and announcing Itchy Pollen, me drawing the Buddy Poffin, showing it, and yeah, there's only the option of attaching and passing. The attachment, of course, to make sure that I can get to use the attack from Pheasantipity, not that would ever put myself in a good position to use that. And Oscar, well, getting to the start that he wants to. He gets the board set up, gets to make sure that Dracos gets to get in play, and then we get to see the Arven for the candy. And as soon as I saw this candy, I was like, well, there's a Charizard coming, and sure is, rare candy Charizard, searching through the deck for the free energies that you can get to search for the Infernal Rain before you can use the Burning Darkness attack, and putting 2 on the Charmander to charge it up fully. And yeah, energy on Dracloak to make sure that the board is all set up for what Oscar wants here, because essentially next turn there could be a case of, well, Dragapult board wipe situation happening, and just keeps this Itchy Pollen up. You could have gone for the aggressive route of just going Charizard, but it actually makes way more sense to just Buddy thrice 3 times and make sure that your board is set up better than your opponent's. And Oscar, no way he's playing Iono in this case when he has to Brock Scouting to get an additional Dracolic out. Not even having to go for Rabsca yet, since, well, I'm just putting no pressure onto him. And another Recon Directive. And essentially, yeah, not much happening from my side of the board. Could even go for the Ultra Ball to get out additional pieces, not needed. And the third Buddy who strikes, Duskull gets on the bench, although with a Dragapult next turn, that could have gone. So that's why I have to retreat and kind of bait Oscar into taking a knockout and making sure I can get to Pheasantipity to somehow get some false hope that I can get to play the game. Although with 2 boards like this, it's never going to happen. And Dragapult, Boss's Orders, and Luminous Energy for the knockout, and the game not much happening on the side of game 2, which doesn't do game 1 enough justice. But as seen, if we cut through game 1, there's a lot of options to have gone through, especially in the scenario where there were 2 Charmanders in play. Now, when reviewing this, there's always the board state of this board state, right? Like, when you get to a board state like this, you take the knockout under a cloak, and you feel all nice and dandy, and then getting there into after knockout under cloak, having just Relor and Dreepy in play, and then Oscar with a build-up board, getting through the turns, Ultra Balling, and essentially just going Itchy Pollen after this turn, and getting into a situation with double Charmander is the only threat. So take this as a lesson. You can always just make sure that if you have an idea of what your opponent is playing, there's no way Oscar plays Crispin. When there's Luminous Energies in a deck, this kind of deck, just take out the double Charmanders and make sure to have the game there. But with that said, that is going to be this top 8 of the Lumbu League Cup. Happened this last weekend. And yeah, another victory for Oscar, getting into top 4 of this cup, making sure to keep his cup runs going. But this has been all from me. Thank you so much for watching. Do remember to subscribe and make sure that you get to watch our episodes. But yeah, have a good day, and we'll see you for our next video.